All right. Are you struggling to tell your story? Storytelling is a key part of the job hunt today, and today we have a panel of experts to help you find your voice. So we're live with the Modern Job Hunt. This is a podcast for job seekers from the first person perspective. I started this podcast when I got laid off from a tech company. I thought that bringing together experts from different areas would help other job seekers. And so I just started reading episodes around different topics that friends were asking me about. So, yeah, today's episode is called Crafting Your Story: How Personal Brands Shape Your Job Search and Journey. In this episode, we'll be connecting with Bosky, Anna, Joseph to discuss the essentials of personal branding for job seekers. And we'll explore the role of LinkedIn, candidate storytelling, and sharing success, highlighting the impact of personal brandings. So, is my audio going in and out still? It is. All right, let me see if I can tweak that. 1 second. All right, better now? Better?
It almost sounds like there's a little bit of ducking or something. It's kind of like lowering the volume. If there's background noise, perhaps.
No.
Work now? Better? No?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, we'll just roll with this, and hopefully it goes smoothly.
Cool.
So yeah, this episode we'll be talking about LinkedIn, candidate storytelling, and sharing success, highlighting the impact of branding. So today on the show, yeah, okay, you have some experience, great, so that's good to hear. We have Bosky. Bosky is a product leader with over 20 years of experience working at places like Atlassian and a bunch of startups. Bosky is the founder of PM Dojo, an ed tech company that enables career professionals to transition and promote in product roles with real experience, mentorship, and coaching. We also have Anna. Anna is the founder of Second Careers, a career consultancy for early career talent that provides online courses and personalized coaching to guide career changers to land tech jobs. And we have Joseph. Joseph is a brand strategist and trusted advisor building makers, creators, and leaders. So welcome, Bosky, Anna, and Joseph. For anyone watching along today, I tried to improve my audio by using Crisp AI, and apparently it's not working as smoothly as I had thought. So I always talk about what I've changed in between episodes. So I did set up Crisp, and I thought I had tested it out, but apparently it was not working perfectly. So if also I've just put up Anna's QR code for anyone that wants to learn more about Anna there, and Joseph's there. So with that said, yeah, I've also tried to improve the marketing. So if anyone did find this through a post that I made yesterday, just post in the comments because I'm trying to, prepare a bit more for the episodes around the marketing front, and I improved my guest communication. So hopefully these guests know exactly what they're doing today because I have been working on that. So, all right. Now, with that being said, I'm going to kind of jump right into personal brand and storytelling. So that is, I find the term personal brand has mixed reviews. I'm going to go to the coaches on this one, Anna and Bosky. When you work with your clients, do you use the word personal brand, or is there a better word out there in the coaching community for how people find their voice?
I can start. I think for me, for a big part of my career, because I've been an introvert, I think I've always shied away from promoting myself. And I think this holds true for a lot of women as well. Something that I have kind of clutched into is called building social credibility or building my own credibility instead of personal branding, which can, I think, scare a lot of people. And so that is something that I use in my coaching practice. This is what I use in PM Dojo. This is what I've personally used in my own career as well. What you do every day to build your credibility, either it is inside the organization or it is outside, depending on what you want to do. Because I don't think everyone wants to become a content writer. I don't think everyone wants to become a speaker. But I think when you are very intentional about building your credibility, your integrity, so that people know about you and they know that if we want something like this, Anna or Joseph or Ryan, you are the right people. I think for me, that speaks much more truthfully to who I am as a person. And I find that that connects to a lot of people that I work with. So that's what I use. But I don't have any qualms about someone saying, oh, I'm building my personal brand. It's okay. But that's what I use personally.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So that's a great context. One of the words that I use a lot with clients and just in my own content is visibility. So personal branding is great, and it's a good professional term that, like, for people that are content creators, thought leaders, like all those other fancier words, we get it because, like, branding doesn't scare us. Like, we know that, like, we are our own brand or the companies that we're building as a brand. But if you're a job seeker, especially early career, so let's say you were a teacher for 10 years and now you have to find a job in like tech and you're not getting interviews because like you're just not getting seen, really that's when visibility is like the term that encompasses everything from networking, DMing people, posting on LinkedIn, contacting your friends, like all those things. On LinkedIn specifically, personal branding resonates a lot as a term because you're really like talking about yourself. So sometimes I tell clients like speak from the heart because like really, well, we're not going to, talk about maybe our deep beliefs about something that is not like we want to share on LinkedIn, but we could share, our deep interests in something that is professional and related to your job. Or in a hobby, joined a masterclass. His hobby was collecting cards, I think some kind of card game. And he was moving into engineering, right? So like there's other people that are interested in that. So I wouldn't say build your entire brand on a hobby, but like adding bits of your personality is a really important part of like showing up. That's another term that I use. It's like you have to show up, you have to be visible. So that's kind of how I summarize it.
And Joseph, how do you view these answers as kind of a branding guide? I'm sure there's a lot of parallels to kind of business branding.
I love this question so much, Ryan, and thanks again for having us on. I think, whether we're talking about kind of corporate branding or personal branding, I kind of, even as somebody who's been in this world for over a decade now, I kind of cringe every time I hear that word. It's sort of like, I just imagine like the hashtag brands are at it again, talking to each other on Twitter and sort of corporate speak or whatever it may be. And I love what Bosky said about that idea of intentionality. And I think that whenever I'm talking to somebody about their sort of personal brand, the way that I kind of attack these things is a little bit different and sort of supplemental to the way that Anna was talking about it, for instance, where content and visibility are very, very important. I look at it a little bit, I kind of take a step back, maybe take more of sort of a 30,000 foot view, where the way that I think about personal brand is that it's really about knowing yourself very, very well, knowing what you want, and then being incredibly intentional, to use the word that Bosky used, about everything that you're doing to go out and achieve that goal. Because it's really just about, like, anytime we talk about brand or branding or sort of these words, it's all about using perception of you to fuel growth. And I think that there is this misnomer that to curate a personal brand means you need to be a celebrity. And the reality is that not everybody wants to be Kim Kardashian or Oprah, right? Not everybody. I think Bosky, I also identify as being an introvert very much. And I think that there are still intentional and kind of curated steps that you can take, not just around your content, not just around your communication, but even in sort of the micro moments and the way that you show up that can go to reinforce the perception of who it is that ultimately you want to be.
I love that. I think both from Anna and from Joseph, I think if I might just add, I think one thing, I think especially for a lot of people who are working, I think personal branding has become this huge thing. Everybody is talking about it. everyone suddenly is writing a lot of the stuff for good reasons. I love writing, right? I think writing helps us critically think about what we are thinking. And I think once we write it down and once we share it out, I think we are again more intentional, more nitpicking our thoughts, because I think a lot of things, if we think in our head, they all seem to be wonderful and great. But I think when we start writing it down and when we share it, I think we become a little bit more picky about what we are writing. So I am all for writing. But I think when you're thinking about credibility or personal brand or visibility or showing up, what is really important from a career standpoint is oftentimes it's not just about writing externally. How do you speak to your manager? Or how do you go and introduce yourself and build that relationship with, let's say, a skip level or a C-level suite? All of this is encompassed under building your credibility. You're not going to just have a conversation with your manager to talk about status reports. You don't want to just go and have a conversation with your skip level only when you want more money or when we want a promotion. It's all about them knowing about you, that you exist, so that when decisions about you and your career are being made behind closed doors, that perhaps you are not there, maybe even your manager is not there, someone knows about your existence and the work that you're doing and can speak on your behalf and advocate for you. And I think that is so important when we're thinking about building credibility, both inside and outside. I mean, there have been countless times when opportunities have come to people from folks not within the organization, because if you think about the tech industry, it seems large, but it's actually very small. Most of the folks know each other. And it's amazing to see what other people talk about you and how much they can advocate or not advocate. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to add that there.
I love that, Bosky. And I think that one of the things that we talk about with brands is there aren't good brands and bad brands. They're just clear brands and unclear brands. And the sort of best examples or the best in class brands are those super, super clear ones where if you polled 10 people around a table, what do you think of brand X? They're all going to say more or less the same thing. And I think to your point, that helps with that sort of quote unquote word of mouth marketing, whether you're a business trying to sell a product or a solution, or you are an individual who is, seeking out a new opportunity or looking for, to pivot in their career, right? To have somebody else advocating on your behalf. So I think I just want to second that point. I think that's really smart.
Yeah. I'll kind of jump off that one. To pivot your career. So this next one's going to go to Anna. And so Anna, your company basically focuses on career transitions. And one of the things that I'm hearing is a lot about you have to know yourself to be able to project yourself. And how does that actually, how much of kind of career coaching is CVs, interview tactics, and how much of it is talking to your clients about figuring out what do you want? Who are you? What is your story? I'm just curious, like kind of in you Bosky and Joseph can kind of go on to this topic of self-discovery first to then be able to project out.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually the entire job search is just understanding what's a fit for you. So you want to start with, well, what are you bringing to the table? And then if you back up from there, it's like, what's your story? What's your background? Like transferable skills is a huge part, understanding what domain you're coming from, like if you're a teacher or other industries or a lawyer. So understanding your real skills that you're bringing to the table outside of tech is the first step. The second step is combining your domain knowledge with your new technical knowledge. So kind of building up the skills there, and maybe you don't feel confident right away, but basically doing things to feel confident in your new skills. So with every client, we start with building a career story. And this career story is essentially how they talk about themselves whenever they make a post or do a connection call or interview. So the very first step is actually helping them kind of lay the groundwork of what their personal brand would be, or how you're communicating with others and how you're showing up, and in what ways are you connecting with others, essentially. So a lot of people might really forget, people forget that they have done things in the last 5-10 years, right? And now you're faced with this really new journey of a new industry, and you have even more fear coming up. So basically, by creating this narrative that you can share with others, you can pick out the highlights. And a lot of personal branding is like talking about highlights and picking out stories and building around that. So whether it's your CV, your LinkedIn profile, your interviews, connection calls, literally every single interaction, you're going to want to pull from your understanding of your career story and pick out the best parts for the right conversations. So I'm sure Joseph and Bosky will have a lot to talk about on top.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think, I can just kind of share from personal experience. I went through a pretty major career transition shortly before getting into brand strategy professionally. When I was younger, sort of through college, I did a lot of work in the music business and growing up in LA, Southern California. And I thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life until somebody came along and said, hey, there's this thing called brand strategy. And I was very interested in it. But I had no, to the point that we were talking about earlier, no credibility, no proof points in that, industry whatsoever. I had no right to be walking into boardrooms of corporations and telling people how to run their businesses. But I was an expert in, Anna, to your point about storytelling, what I was an expert in is all that time working in music, I understood what it took to create something that an audience would ultimately identify with, right? Which is how we think about like the musicians and artists we love. We buy t-shirts, we get tattoos, they are a fabric of our being in the way that we tell our story. And so I couldn't talk about, KPIs. I didn't know the right acronyms, but through understanding, okay, well, there is this sort of area that I am very credible in that is the transferable skill to this new industry and this new business, I was able to at least get my foot in the door sort of telling that story. And I think that, a lot of times, because we are so focused in kind of the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts of what maybe like a job description asks for, right? We forget that there are all of these other soft skills from a number of different industries that transfer. And you can kind of use that as at least a jumping off point to tell your story. So again, just a tiny little bit of me search, which isn't always the best advice, but that was my experience with that. And I think ties directly back to what Anna was talking about.
100%. I absolutely agree with both Anna and Joseph on that. I think storytelling is a very underrated skill because you need it not only for telling your personal stories to kind of build that credibility externally and attract opportunities. Because the market has drastically changed. Especially in the tech industry, I can speak for the tech industry. The last 2 years have shown us a very different side, although we've seen lots of dips, over the last 20 years, there's been countless dips, but yes, this one does feel different. So, you cannot just apply and then wait. You have to do other things. Outreach is a big part. And for doing outreach, you have to be out there. But even inside the organization, right? Or even building and continuing to nurture those relationships that you might have built over the last many years. I think just personally, like I've forgotten how many career transitions I've made in my life right now, but also moving across countries and rebuilding your life as an immigrant. That's a huge, because you don't have your network, right? So next month we are completely packing our entire family and moving out of Canada back into the Bay Area. For the second time we're doing this. And it although I've been very well connected with the folks in the Bay Area, I've lost connections with pandemic and everything over Zoom. And so I've been spending a lot of time trying to, again, reconnect and build those relationships so that I have a community and my tribe, that I can call my own when I reach there, and with my kids and with my kid and everything. But I think to a point here, the way I like to think about, what has been happening in just from a job seeker standpoint is that the market evolves. That's given. It's always evolved. And so as the market evolves, especially in tech, the tech industry also evolves, and then there are market shifts. What that does is that whatever skills and experiences we have, it always feels like the gap is widening and you have to catch up, right? Because you can never get to a place where you can confidently say, at least I haven't met anyone even successful entrepreneurs and founders who can confidently say, I know everything that is to know. So the gap is constantly widening. And so, of course, you have to close that gap strategically so that you don't get burnt out, but you also have to do it in a very, very tactful way so that you are getting prepared for roles and for fields that are going to be relevant in the next at least 2-3 years, right? And so that needs a little bit of an oversight. But as the market is shifting, your stories have to change. You have to tell relevant stories for the current time. And so I think a lot of folks, when I'm coaching them, I think, we tend to focus as humans on things we don't have versus things we have. I call that leverage. And we all have leverage. And I think when we're telling story, we have to find those links so that each chapter in our, career, in our life, to the person who's listening to a story feels like it is a very well edited book, and every logical step was, or every step was just logical, even though in our own world it might seem like, we did something because that was the only available option. But you have to kind of pause and look at it from, inside out, outside in, and see what connections and patterns you can draw. And then tell that story in a way that the next opportunity that you're looking for is, again, the next logical step. And everything that you've done over the years, months, days, kind of is building towards it. And I think that makes it a very powerful story. But at the end of the day, if there are skills and experiences and competencies, I call them competencies, that are a big gap, then you have to address those. Absolutely. Because again, the market that we are in right now, we are competing against very experienced folks. So storytelling is only one piece of the puzzle. And so it starts with, I think, you and the market fit. It's like two puzzle pieces. There has to be that fit as close to possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one thing to summarize that is that sometimes you can even gain experience taking a job that you might not be looking for. Like some people go into customer success first, maybe 6 months, a year in that role. And in fact, in product, on the topic of product, it's a good transitional point that some people don't think about, because you learn a lot about the workings of the company, the customers, the product, all that stuff. And then you can transition into more of the role that you were really, intending to, like engineering, design, product, data, whatever it is. So you can definitely use your experience now to just get a foothold into something in an industry that you're looking for, or a specific role that you're looking for, and then move forward from there. So there's different ways to close the gap and then build your story.
I love that. And I think I want to go back to a word that Bosky used, which is this idea of relationships. And all branding is, all brand strategy is, whether you're talking about a Fortune 100 company, a startup, or a personal brand, it's just relationship building. And quite frankly, long-term relationship building. And so, the reality is that by being really intentional about your personal brand, let's say you start today, right? You may not see results this quarter. It may not help you with the next job that you're going to get, but it certainly will help you with the job after that and the job after that. And the reason that we like to use relationships as sort of like the sort of baseline for this is that relationships are built on trust. I mean, whether it's the barista that's at your corner coffee shop, or whether it's your best friend or loved ones, right? They trust you because you show up for them consistently, right? And so I think we're talking about, and rightfully so, all of these different places that your personal brand shows up, whether it's your CV or your resume or what you're posting on LinkedIn, right? But I hope that people leave this discussion realizing that there's a really easy first way to take, your first step into being intentional about your personal brand. And it's the simplest thing of all time. It's just being really, really clear about who you are, and to the point that was made, like matching that up with an opportunity, right? And showing up super consistently with that every single day. And by consistency, I don't necessarily mean showing up exactly the same way, right? But showing up in a way that's appropriate for that audience that ties back to who you are. So when you think about, Nike, for example, just use a really easy, recognizable brand. And you can take this concept and think about it, sort of in your own life as well. Nike's brand, as they sort of describe it, is to bring innovation, inspiration and innovation to every athlete. And there's an asterisk next to athlete. It says, if you have a body, you are an athlete. So congratulations to all of us. And that's powerful, but the context of the tagline, just do it, like it actually becomes more powerful in that sort of ecosystem that they built out, right? The it doesn't matter, it's the do that is sort of the sort of focus there, right? Whether you're just getting up and walking around the block or whether you're LeBron James winning an NBA championship, Nike is giving you the inspiration to do that. Now, they will market yoga pants differently than they will market basketball shoes, differently than they will market, a partnership with another brand, right? But it always is going to stay true to that idea of inspiration and innovation. And so when we think about consistency, knowing who you are and then tailoring who you are to that audience or that opportunity, ultimately over time, that's what's going to ladder up to the wins. But it is about relationship building. And relationships aren't just built by saying, hey, look at me, I'm cool, you should hang out with me. It takes showing up every single day, right?
So with that being said, I'm going to do kind of two little micro polls. And the first question is, have you guys ever seen a CV where someone has deleted years of experience? Yeah, did anyone put hands up? Yeah, okay, so everyone's agreed. And have you ever seen a CV where it talks nothing about their personality or who they are as a person and it's only work experience? Yeah, so these are my two things that I always feel are mistakes, and we're going to kind of launch into mistakes around personal brand as the kind of the next phase. And I view these two things as errors because everything we've talked about so far is you are who you are. You have a unique background. No one else has a background like you. And if you delete your experience on your CV, then you're throwing out all this great stories that you can tell from your background. So include them. You may not include them in the same size, but condense them and you can include them. And also personality. I'm like, how could I get into an interview and not have personality pieces in my, because that's like a layup. They can ask you personal questions, get the ball rolling. They want to help you with the interview. So with those are my two kind of tips for people that kind of tie into this conversation. And we'll just go into like mistakes around personal brands, like what people can kind of, what you've seen that you're like, oh man, this is another mistake that people often make around personal branding or their voice.
I can start. I don't know if it's a mistake, but I think maybe there it's not as effective. I would say so. I think reacting and not thinking clearly. I think in this whole hustle culture and in the bias for action and all of these fancy phrases that we hear a lot, I think we take these phrases so literally that we've, as a species, evolved to a stage where we believe that we hear a question or something's asked of us and immediately we have to just blurt out an answer. And we are losing that ability to think because we are imagining that thinking is a waste of time. Right? And we're not going to move fast if we think. And a lot of times I think that for that credibility, what do you say, even if you don't have an answer, but how do you then address that thing? If you don't have an answer, do you just blurt out something or do you ask for time? But how can you be strategic and mindful about asking for that time so that you're not messing up with the credibility, right? Because even not answering or not having the answers to all the questions that are getting asked of you at work, outside of work, I think it needs a lot of grace and humility and confidence to be walking away and saying, I don't have the answer. Let me think about it and get back to you. I think that shows courage and that shows that you have substance. And I think that a lot of people, I think we are moving away from it and just don't do it. So I think that for me is a mistake, is a lost opportunity, I would say. And every time we do that, I think to Joseph's point, it's the trust, right? It's a bank. Every time, it's very easy for the jar to start getting empty. And then it takes a long time. And sometimes it never happens to build that credibility and that trust jar again. I think the second thing is, I love being in tech. I love AI. I love ChatGPT and all of that. But most of the content is so generic. I think I've become a pro now. When I see a comment or when I see a post, I'm like, oh my God, that is written by ChatGPT. It has got nothing to do. It's losing that human thing, even though Gen AI and all of that is supposed to replicate how humans talk. But I think people are losing their own unique point of view. And most of the stuff is becoming so generic. And I don't think that does anything to build your credibility. It probably attacks your credibility because you're, again, not standing out. You're not bringing any unique point of view to the table. You're kind of blending in. And that is the that is the worst thing you can do in this market, at least as a job searcher, right? To blend in with everyone else. I think the third thing that I see a lot of the times is even the folks who are not relying on ChatGPT. I think it's about just filling in the blanks of some framework that exists. And again, when you do that, if I'm a hiring manager, I'm looking to hire, I mean, ChatGPT can fill the framework way faster than a human can. So why am I supposed to pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire an individual? I'm hiring someone, especially in tech, to very creatively solve very complex, wicked problems that cannot just be solved with just throwing in, right? Yes, if you're looking for speed and things like that, of course, AI and technology can help. But when I'm looking at creative problem solving, when I'm looking at how can you think from different perspectives, different lenses, how can we work together and collaborate together from multidisciplinary fields to look at this problem and find the scrappiest way to, let's say, go to market, as an example, or how do we communicate in a way that it touches the senses of different target audience. You can definitely leverage technology, but don't start with using them as crutches. And I think we really need to think through clearly, and critical thinking is something that I think we need to get back on a little bit more. And then being different and bringing that point of view. We don't have to become Elon Musks and all of these, awesome leaders when we are writing or expressing our thought. We can still be our unique us, because we still have our set of experiences and backgrounds that perhaps has given us a perspective on life and work and things in the world. And I think that is important to learn how to communicate, as opposed to just relying on tools per se and frameworks.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So one thing that I guess I wanted to add on top of, the critical thinking point and creativity is, tech is really all about innovation, really. Like when Joseph was talking about Nike's, core branding, that is pretty much applicable to the whole idea of why people work in tech, why the tech industry exists, why startups still are, happening and getting funded. It's about innovation, and innovation doesn't happen overnight, and innovation is not yet going to be solved through technology alone. So we forget that technology is a tool, and it's just like a hammer or a nail or a computer. Like a computer at this point in time is not going to write your own, your own things, their own. It's not going to do your own podcast. We're not there yet. So basically, in terms of mistakes or gaps or opportunities, whichever words you want to use, I think creativity and showcasing your uniqueness is a really big missed opportunity. And people really feel scared of showing up and being themselves. And they say, well, what can I share? What is there to share? Why does anyone care? Well, you know what? Unless you start sharing, you won't get feedback. And the fears that show up, those are, the blockers that essentially create these missed opportunities or sort of mistakes. But I wouldn't think of anything like a mistake, because one thing, to the specific point of the CV that you were talking about, is that the CV is not the best place to showcase your personality or brand. The CV is 1/10 of the entire experience, and it gets maybe 3 seconds of attention. Your LinkedIn is getting attention, your portfolio, your actual person, right? In an interview, they're not interviewing your piece of paper CV. They're interviewing you as an individual. And the CV is basically a note card to make sure that, the interviewer has the 2 seconds before the interview to know, who are they talking to? So a bit of thoughts around that. And the biggest thing that people can do, whether they're job searching or not, just if you want to work in tech or just make it easier to get a job, is to not miss out on the opportunity to showcase your unique story. So even if you have all the fears, which a lot of people do in the beginning, and believe me, I did, and I'm sure, anyone starting with writing about yourself or sharing about yourself did, you just Right. You just write about what's on your mind in the professional space, why you did something, wins and challenges. Really easy ways for people to get into like avoiding the trap of like, there's nothing I can say, is to write a win, to do a summary of what did I accomplish this week that I like to share with you. Because human psychology says everyone loves to celebrate and everyone loves to help. So if you share a win or a challenge, really easy way to get started into that. But just to kind of wrap kind of this topic on my end is that like your CV is the least visible and the hardest to even brand because it's not really the system for that. So really focus on like LinkedIn, your DMs, your connection calls, literally the relationships that Joseph mentioned, like your branding, your visibility, who you are is in your communication, preferably real time, but also in DM and chat, the comments you put up, things like that. So don't worry so much about like making your CV shine because you know what? It's probably going to get like 2 seconds of attention. And if it gets more, great, but it's not going to like really move things forward for you. Really, all these little points of connection will do that. So
yeah, those holiday cards and those messages without asking for anything are 10 times more important than your CV and your resume, you know, in terms of relationship building. I love those points, Anna and Bosky. A couple of things that just, you know, add to what's already been said. To the point of, you know, reacting with the answer, I don't know. You know, I find not necessarily in sort of the hiring process, but just in general, it's such a refreshing answer in this day and age. It really makes me trust people more when they are able to have the confidence to say that they don't have the answer and that maybe they'll go find out and get back to you or whatever it may be. So I think that's really great. The other thing too is just in terms of storytelling, like sharing failures, I think is something that gets overlooked a lot. There's a reason that the hero's journey is the same storytelling framework that's been used from religious texts all the way up to, you know, Star Wars, to everything, because you do have to, there has to be tension points and things to overcome. And the way that we relate to one another is actually in the darkest moments, not in the brightest moments. And I think that sharing those in the right context, of course, is something that can be really, really, you know, beneficial to anybody looking for any opportunities, whether it's a job or an entrepreneurial journey or whatever it may be. And the other thing that I'll say too, and I say this with, you know, all sort of realization and acceptance that I have the good fortune of being born a straight white man in the United States of America. Like asking for help is like, goes a long way, you know, and being honest. And again, sort of to the points of like the dark moments and, you know, maybe where you're in the midst of struggles and trying to overcome things. Vulnerability is a point of, I think, relatability for folks, and asking for help and being really honest about the way that you're feeling and what you're going through and what you're looking for and what you want. You know, Anna mentioned it earlier, like people want to help. They want to help you. And when you have those relationships and you've spent time so that people, you know, building that trust up with folks, there will come a time where folks will help you when you ask for it. And the same will be true. You'll have an opportunity to tell people going forward. And so I think that a lot of times we are scared to ask for help. It's hard to ask for help. Similar to answering, I don't know. We want to feel like we have all the answers and that everything is at our fingertips and under our control. But the reality is that it's not. And just that human action of vulnerability, I think, is really, really powerful when used right.
I love that, Joseph. I mean, this is something I have conversations with my 9-year-old all the time. So he's a very interesting kid. I love him too. But he's also at a place where he doesn't want to ask for help from this age, right? Because he wants to prove he can do a lot of things. He also wants to be a product manager and an entrepreneur already. He also wants to write a book. Like he has all these big mega dreams. He wants to share the stage with Jungkook and Charlie Puth. You know, he tried to create a video and send it to them, you know, when Charlie Puth was coming to Vancouver. Like he does, you know, for a 9-year-old to be doing a lot of these things. I mean, I give kudos to him. I mean, he's probably building his personal brand already.
That's awesome.
But, you know, I often tell him, you know, and there is this little poster in his room, and it's like, you know, it is brave to ask for help. Even superheroes ask for help. And I think that so true. Because if you think about any superhero movie, they do ask for help in their own way. And, and I think we are only humans. And I think how we ask for help, whom we ask for help, I think because a lot of times, especially for women, there is this perceived notion, especially in the tech industry, well, if I ask for help and that happens to be from a man, will I
Yeah.
be just judged, and maybe they're going to think I'm not good enough? And it can happen to men too. It can happen to people from underrepresented minorities as well. I mean, their biases are there. But I think how we ask for help, who we ask for help, and I think it goes down to, again, what Joseph was saying, that relationship, right? And it's a give and take. You can't just reach out to someone all of a sudden and expect they're going to drop everything on their plate and come to help you.
Right.
Like, think about, I've certainly made the mistake where, early in my career, I've reached out to someone out of blue and just sent my resume and said, hey, I'm looking for blah, 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 blah opportunities. Have I ever heard back? No. Do I return back to those messages that I receive every single time? In fact, just 2 came in right now because I shared a post with like 50 jobs today that I came, and there are like 10, 20 emails in my LinkedIn, massive messages with a resume. What am I supposed to do with that? So I think, you have to kind of invest. You have to put something in that trust jar first. And it's a very hard thing to do because for someone looking for a job or for someone looking for that next opportunity, I think we're looking short term. And I think to Joseph's point right in the beginning, you have to play that long game. You have to think about it long term because they come with dividends. And then you give back and then it compounds over time, right? But it takes time.
I love that your 9-year-old is already like diving into that. It's really great. Well, I admire Scott Galloway, the professor and entrepreneur, and he talks a lot about the importance of resilience as like just a key kind of thing to have in your tool belt. And I think that you can't build that until you work up the bravery to ask for something and get told no, and I think that we so admire success in our culture that we're all so afraid of being told no. And the faster we can be told no, the better, And so kind of integrating that whole thing into your story and the things that you've had to overcome and the times that you've had to be resilient, those are just as powerful, I think personally, as any peak you share, in your professional journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one small note just on the, networking aspect is that there seems to be a misconception of, because, I've been talking a lot about networking, that's become my thing. There seems to be a misconception of like, how do you go about networking? And people feel really like stuck in their bubble. And that's where you see their messages. And I get those messages too. But because I've been talking so much about, here's literally how you network. You say hi, how's it going? Like I give people a lot of examples. So hopefully some of them are reading it. So I've been getting more messages that are actually just, I've enjoyed your content, like thanks for putting it out there, or, I'd like to connect and, see if you could share any additional tips, like here's my situation, like in a very short summary, right? But for doing that to someone like me, it makes sense because like I say, if you need help, DM me, right? But there's this big misconception about how do you even ask for help and what does that look like? And then if people get really stuck in their own heads and they get really frustrated and anxious, like then you see the kind of messages of like, I'm just going to spam everyone with my resume and see if that does anything, because there's no pause for that strategic approach, because maybe they've never heard of it because it's kind of all new thing for a lot of people, right? So
I think there's a lot of overlap between this conversation and actually the last conversation I had on this podcast, which was all about building community. And interestingly enough, this one was dialed in at personal brand, and that one was dialed in at community, and they're both kind of meeting right in the middle. And I think I actually said a line last week where if you put $2 into the community and you pull one out, you're all good. You're going to keep building that community and you're going to be happy. And interestingly enough, Bosky's comment was exactly on the money on that, where, if you're always pulling from the jar, and you're never putting your coin back in, then no one's going to help you. But like if you put $3 in and you help 5 people and you only ask one person for help and you say, hey, I really need help with this. Not only do you easily ask for help because you've helped 4 other people, but they're far more willing to help you, and your brand will feed into that community. And also, like, I really like the piece that came out of that episode where everyone said community, not network, because
Yes.
network is viewed as this transactional thing, and you're always trying to network with those DM posts that Anna was mentioning. Whereas if you say I'm going to build community, like, you don't go up and network with your neighbor. You build community with your neighbor. You bring them
Right.
sugar, whatever they need. So it's interesting that in this episode we went in on credibility and visibility at the start for personal brand. And if we just change some of these narratives of build a community, have visibility, then people will start to really get it.
I agree.
So yeah,
I agree
Absolutely.
completely. The amount of time in therapy I spent talking about networking until I had that, mental model shift, because it's very daunting for folks. And I think that our business sort of obsession, in the United States and North America, I think the fact that it is gamified and that there is an output and that transactions need to happen, it distracts us from the fact that it's just people trying to be people, And just as much as you need to know what it is that you need from other people, I think knowing the ways that you can help other people, the ways that you can put money into that community jar, so to speak, that's everything,
Absolutely. It's sometimes old school is good. You know, if you think about just how humans evolved, we were scribbling stories on the cave walls. We lived in communities, we supported each other, we helped each other. I think some of that, there is some good to some of the old school thinking. And I think, maybe somewhere down the road, networking became handing down the business cards, and then I think LinkedIn had this feature. I don't know if they still have that feature, but at one point, I think many years ago, they had this feature where you could kind of just show the QR code and connect. You didn't even have to kind of talk, and you would just kind of connect it through the QR code on LinkedIn directly. But I mean, those are connections. They're not relationships. I mean, half of the time, if someone were to reach out to me and I look and I'm like, I'm connected to them. How did I connect? I have no recollection. And so I think you're very rightful, like both, Anna, Joseph, and Ryan, like there's a difference between, I think, a connection request and then how do you network, and then how do you build that community and relationship so that it becomes a mutual kind of an ecosystem where you both can kind of support each other, or multiple people can support each other, amplify each other, find and seek opportunities. And it becomes more than, I think, just that transaction that I need something from you, you need something from me. You're kind of helping each other through thick and thin of life. Because I mean, this is life, right? Whatever goes up comes down, and whatever is down goes up eventually. And it's just a circle of life at the end of the day.
all right. Well, so what we're going to do now is kind of a round table of tips for people around this whole visibility, credibility, and personal brand piece, and resources. So if you have a book like Scott Gallagher or anything like that, or a course or something like that, what can people go to after this episode and kind of dig into this whole category? So we'll kind of go down on my screen. Anna, you're below me on my screen, so we'll go to you first for kind of tips and resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of visibility, branding, building connections, I would definitely recommend to start posting once a week on LinkedIn. If that feels scary, post in whatever network you are in, wherever you have people. That could be a private Slack channel, that could be a blog, whatever. But basically, one thing that you can post is something that people don't know about you. And I bet there's a lot of things that people don't know about you naturally, right? Because you're just like new on the scene, or maybe you've been silently kind of reviewing people's profiles, but not sharing about yourself. So post one new thing that people don't know about you, or you haven't shared yet, once a week. And suddenly you're building, credibility and perception about showing up. Just showing up in itself is the first step. After that, hopefully you post something that's relevant to the market or the role or something like that. But just show up by sharing who you are. In terms of resources, I would recommend it. One, DM me. I actually answer my DMs. I love sharing resources. That's why I started my business, to help people get into tech, because I had a lot of trouble in my years doing that. And I do have a course in coaching. So whatever, or free resources. So the main resource that I share with every single person is a 20-minute video training on networking, the high level concept. And it's done a lot of good for a lot of people. So DM me on LinkedIn and ask me for that, or just ask me any questions about your job search process, credibility, visibility, whatever it is that you're working through. Reach out and I'll help you with what I can.
All right, over to Bosky.
Awesome. No, those are absolutely great, Anna. I think a tip, I want to touch imposter syndrome or self-doubt in this, because I think anytime for someone starting out, or I think even experienced folks, it's a very natural human feeling. I think I remember one of my managers told me this years ago when I felt so out of place that I completely froze at work. And he said, the line of imposter syndrome is very thin, and it's your decision whether you want to be on this side where you are doubting yourself and you're reframing that doubt to say, well, maybe it's just excitement that I'm feeling, because I think in our body it produces the same kind of, I think, emotion and feeling when we're either excited or we're too scared. But it is about a slight reframing. Or you want to be on the other side of the line where you get so cocky and such a jerk that no one wants to work with you. So which side of the line do you want to be of imposter syndrome? And I didn't understand what the hell he was saying back when he's told me this. But over the years, as I've gotten a lot of gray hair, I think those words are something that have kept me sane and kept me grounded and pushed me to do a lot of stuff. So I think that would be one tip for anyone starting anything new, whether it is trying to build your credibility, starting a new job, or finding yourself in a situation where you have no clue of what to do. So just keep the conversation going and ask yourself which side of the line, because I can bet you that being humble and being nice is much more important, and it's going to get you a lot far than being a cocky jerk. Right? Because no one wants to work with cocky jerks. So that would be a tip. I think in terms of resources, I think one resource that I absolutely love is from my ex-boss at Atlassian. It's a 13-minute TED Talk on imposter syndrome. And it comes from a white, very successful man of a unicorn, multi-billionaire. And so we don't hear a lot about imposter syndrome from men. And if you search Mike Cannon-Brookes TED Talk on imposter syndrome, it's an amazing masterclass in itself on self-doubt, on storytelling, and how do you build that credibility. So I always recommend it's a resource that I've bookmarked over the years that I go to multiple times, even in a day when I need that little boost. So that would be one resource. I think the second one is I write a whole bunch of my stories dealing with PTSD, anxiety, me stepping down from the role of a president a few years ago, starting my own journey in entrepreneurship pretty late, a lot of my failures, or even, from a career search, job search, building experience on LinkedIn quite a bit, almost on a daily basis. So anyone, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me, a message. Definitely, please don't send me just a blank connection request. If you can relate and say that we met here, that would be awesome. I do reply just like Anna. So I would say those are the two resources that I would share here.
Fantastic. And Joseph?
Amazing. Well, Ryan, just want to say thanks for having us on today. This was awesome. Anna, Bosky, I feel like I learned so much from both of you. So thank you so much for sharing all your expertise. I think that the biggest thing and the main thing that I hope folks take away from this, like I mentioned earlier, is that there is no sort of silver, magic bullet for brand. Branding, you can be thoughtful about the way that you show up and have a curated website and things like that. Those are sort of lower hanging fruit that you can be very thoughtful about. And there's going to be, sort of fruits of that labor. But I think in terms of your brand and who you are and what you can use to build relationships, be very, very simple and clear about who you are and broadcast it consistently. Well, I don't know why that happened. That was a really weird thing. But so, really think about who you are and think about what it is that you want in life. And I don't mean what you want your next job to be, but what it is that you strive for. And that, what that is should be kind of agnostic of your career. It should be agnostic of the charities that you support. It should be agnostic of the way that you show up to your family and friends. It's kind of the thing that ties all of those together. You know, there's nothing else to do other than just sit and think about it, grab a pen and a notebook and a bottle of wine and go to town, you know? But in terms of resources, and by the way, I'm happy to talk about this at any time. People can contact me through my website, through the website of the firm that I helped co-found, Major Futures. We're a strategy consulting firm. But in terms of resources, I think there's 3 books that I really love and kind of swear by in this world. Number one, and none of them are sort of like businessy books. Number one is a book called Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. It's what I love about it is it proves that humans are the same as we've always been, just technology has changed things. And it really helped me understand kind of the basis of storytelling, whether you're telling a micro story or a macro story. That is how we relate to one another. And I think it's really informative in that sense. Another book that I love is called Range by David Epstein. It's a book that basically makes the argument that the best thing that you can be now is resilient and adaptable. That the only thing that we know for certain is that the world is going to change faster and more rapidly than it ever has. And I think to Bosky's point, making sure that you're continually, you know, closing that gap as much as possible is really important. Really, really great book, especially for people with young kids. And then the third book that I love is a book called Love and Work by a guy named Marcus Buckingham. And he has this kind of concept of the red thread, and that you may have a lot of different jobs throughout your life, but the red thread is the reason you show up and why you pour your heart into your job, no matter what it is. He's a kind of the world's most foremost researcher on people's relationship to their jobs and their work, and just a fascinating read. It's his latest book, and I really admire him. So yeah, this was an awesome conversation, and thanks again, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And it's interesting. I kind of sometimes I freestyle the questions, and this was the first time I've asked for resources at the end, and I learned so much from my guests in every episode, and it's great that now I have other things that I can learn after the episode completes, and I'll try to gather some of those resources from Joseph, Bosky, and Anna today and put in the show. I'm pretty slow on the show notes, but I will try to eventually get them all updated. So thanks for everyone for attending today. If anyone wants to see more content like this about job hunting, you can subscribe on my YouTube channel, which just basically is this podcast about the modern job hunt. I've got an episode coming up next week. Bosky mentioned there, experiencing PTSD, imposter syndrome. That's come up so many times in so many episodes. I've actually brought on a psychologist next week. So the episode's called Beyond the Resume, Addressing Mental Health in Your Job Search Journey. So I have a psychologist coming on, and we're going to be talking about that. I've also had so many people message me about leaving education and transitioning back into tech. So I've kind of got a double header that I'm going to be posting next week on Thursday. I'm going to be talking about leaving your undergrad, leaving your MBA, how you actually communicate that experience to the tech community and say this is related, and how to actually tie education and professional experience together. So yeah, and if anyone wants to find more information about me or the show, you can scan that QR code up there. So with that being said, thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. Love the empathy, love the kind of deep personal stories that came out of this. And that's really why I love putting on this show. So if you guys love listening, just comment, let me know what we can cover next on the show. So with that being said, thanks everyone, and we'll call it there. Thanks, guys.